Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Shermer, and I'm a professor of architecture at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and I'm also a principal at Workshop Architects, which is also in Milwaukee. Um, I am happy to talk to you all today about participatory planning with college students. And in this case, I want to focus on one particular project, which was for the uh, Georgia Institute of Technology's John Lewis Student Center. The title of the talk is Reset, Restore, Refuel, and you'll see why. Let me advance forward. So when I think about participation on a college campus, I guess I think of several different things that are part of the process. One is that what we're trying to do at workshop when we work with college students is that we're always trying to understand how a campus operates as a social ecology. We do a lot of work um, across the country, doing a lot of student life um, projects, meaning student unions. We do housing, we do rec centers, we do student success centers and libraries. And working with college students is always a key part of our process. So when I say trying to understand, you'll understand what I mean by understanding how a campus operates as a social ecology. It has a lot to do with belonging. It has a lot to do with wellness. It has a lot to do with um, student success. When I think early on when I started getting interested in participatory design, and it was really early on in my career because I did my master's thesis back when I was in school on participatory design. I was really interested in how you can involve non-designers in the design process. And I came across a researcher named Stephen Kaplan, and he had written some books. He was at the University of Michigan, and he had written about participatory design. And he talked about wanting to not just asking people, what do you want? And he told a story of a group of students who had gone to design a playground. And the students asked the playground, the parents associated with the playground about, they asked them, well, what do you want? And they said, well, what have you got? So they went away and they designed and they came up with an idea and they showed it to the parents. And then the parents said, well, that's not exactly what we want. So then the student said, well, what do you want? And the parents said, well, what else have you got? So that's sort of set up this pretty inefficient, maybe frustrating process where you're trying to guess what people want rather than trying to figure out early through the process what it is that they would really like, what they're trying to accomplish. So the advice that Steve Kaplan gives, and it's the strategy that I've continued to use, is to first, that you don't want to just ask people what they want, but you want to give them alternatives to react to. And that it's not like a question of just choosing one and then going with it. It's really using it to kind of probe and understand what people are thinking and feeling. The other piece of it, and this really comes more from like my practical experience working at workshop, but you want hands-on tactile activities if at all possible. And these days, a lot of the work that we do is online, but there's really no substitute for face-to-face interaction and for giving people something to do with their hands and a way to kind of express themselves. So that's really, really key. I like to say that we try to understand people and their needs, not just from a kind of saying, well, what are your needs? And not what you want, but trying to understand what are the jobs to be done? And that's kind of an important piece or framing that I've borrowed from a professor of business, no longer with us, but Clay Christensen. And he came up with this idea of jobs to be done. as a way of understanding not just what people's functional needs are, but what their social and emotional what they're trying to fulfill socially and emotionally. Every job or every purchase that we make, his argument in his framing has a functional job, but also there's a social and an emotional component to it. Maybe one way of thinking about it is like if you drive a car and you bought a car and you chose that car. For many people, it's just sort of basic transportation, but cars tend to be very symbolic. So my wife likes to drive a hybrid. She thinks of that as, kind of being emblematic of her thriftiness and sort of ecological responsibility. Other people I know drive really sporty cars because they're trying to kind of convey that they're kind of maybe a little macho, that they're fast moving people, that kind of thing. I personally have an electric bike, which is great for virtue signaling about my own interests in urbanism and, wanting more in the way of, fewer cars, more bicycles. So that's part of, there's a kind of an emotional and symbolic piece to that. The last thing I just wanted to say is that when we think about participation, we're not looking for, at least through workshop, we're looking for inspiration rather than specific solutions. We're looking to learn from people what it is that they really, what they really care about, and then to see what does that mean in terms of how it could feed our own sort of creative solutions. So I want to talk about this Georgia Tech Campus Center, which later became known as the John Lewis Student Center. And it goes back to 2015. It's a project that started in 2015, but opened in January of 2022. So you can sort of get a sense about how long it can take for real world projects to develop. But I want to talk about a bunch of different participatory research strategies that I use. So that includes mapping, using a relationship puzzle, using the sort of idea of jobs to be done, using physical models, all toward kind of creating a strategic vision that would work for the campus. So that's a look at the Georgia Tech campus from back in 2015. This was from the rooftop of the old student center, so it's actually, you can still get this view, although this is really the roof, and this building is still, it was renovated. But you can see in the foreground, there's the campanile, which was left over from or a legacy from the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. This big green space out here is called Tech Green. And that is kind of it's sort of the main green space on campus. And then you can see in the far background is the skyline of Midtown Atlanta. And when we got to the campus, we really started thinking about the campus in its sort of entirety. What I've done is I've highlighted in yellow there the outline of the old student center, but you can see here's Tech Green. The highway is the big divide. Midtown Atlanta is to the east, and there's some other features of the campus. But I wanted to just sort of give you a sense of the lay of the land. The campanile is actually right there, and this is what the old campus center building looked like. Kind of in the 1960s, not a lot of natural light. You can see those really, really tiny slit windows. And these exterior blocks, those are fire stairs. You really kind of wonder like what architects were thinking back in the 1960s when they made buildings like this. Not very friendly looking, but that's kind of where we started. And that's looking directly west at the west entry of the old campus center building. On the inside, things probably weren't any better. This is a look at their food court, and you can see that it's pretty much kind of like a kind of grab and go situation. I mean, there is some natural light, but it's pretty much just all inwardly focused. You can see people are kind of, when I say grab and go, they're getting food, they're sitting down, there's not a lot of room to spread out. We would say that this is a very transactional kind of space, not a relational one. So transactional, by that, what I mean by that is it's transactional because people are going and getting their Chick-fil-A, and then they're sitting down, and then they've got to run off to the next class. And there's always this sort of constant flow of people into, or there was this constant flow of people into the setting. And so, you never could really settle in and feel comfortable sticking around for a while. So we would say it's not very sticky. The idea of the mapping kind of came up actually as part of this study that we did for Georgia Tech. I started to think about, well, what are the jobs to be done by a college campus itself? And I started to think about this, and I thought, well, campuses are supposed to provide places where people can be social, where they can bond with friends and meet new people. And of course, campuses are places where people are supposed to be involved in intellectual activity, where they're thinking, collaborating, creating, thinking new thoughts. Campuses are also supposed to have places that help you to feel sort of proud or bonded with the institution itself. It could be great buildings or great outdoor spaces, or just great settings. Maybe it's a statue or something like that that makes you feel proud to be a member of a campus community. And then lastly, there's this idea that, well, with all this sort of studying and socializing going on, people also need places to relax. They need places to reset, restore, and refuel. And that's kind of back to the title of this project. We had gone into the campus thinking that we wanted to when we say we wanted to understand the campus as a social ecology, we were looking for these kinds of asking students to identify these kinds of places. And so we did it in a very analog way using sticky dots, color-coded, and you can see students started placing dots around the campus. And when we got it all together and added things up, what we started to see was a couple of interesting things. There was a brand new building with that giant blue circle that was called the Clough Learning Commons. And that was a relatively new building, very beautifully done. And it had become really the center of intellectual activity for the campus itself. I could point out other social places like the Campus Recreation Center over to the west. The business school was over here. But that student center just sort of seemed to not get a lot of attention from the students that we met with. You can see that the Campanile was sort of got a little bit of attention as a symbolic place. You can see these were sororities and fraternities that were sort of scattered throughout the campus over here. The football stadium's over here, so that was symbolic. And social for some people, but not for everybody. And this is the Tech Tower, which is sort of their sort of older building in an older part of campus. Also very symbolic. So, and there is the little pink square, which shows where the campus center was. So you could see that it felt like the campus center itself wasn't generating a lot of what we were calling campus capital. So not social, intellectual, restorative, or symbolic. At the same time, when we started talking to people on campus, we didn't just talk with students, but we talked a lot with campus administrators, and faculty, the dean of students. And they told us a couple of things that were really important for helping us understand what was going on campus. And what they told us is that tech students are very ambitious, but they work too hard. They undervalue happiness. They talked about competitive martyring. They talked about students feeling guilty if they were going to step back from academics. And I said that these students just don't know how to take a break. These are really, purpose-driven students. And we took that and we started to try to think about how we might understand a typical student's day. So what we did was we fanned out across campus, and we conducted what we called intercept interviews. And this was just to kind of get to know students, not just the ones that would show up to a focus group, because those are typically just not they are not the kinds of students that you really want to get to. They're the ones who are more involved, they're in student leadership. So what we did here is on one of these days, we decided that we should ask students to graph their typical day from chill to work intensity. And Georgia Tech has a bunch of engineering students, and they can all graph, that's for sure. So we started to look at their answers or how they graph their day. And we started to notice two different things. One is that there was there was the type of students who would take a break in the middle of the day. And so we kind of know from this reporting, this graphing, kind of where they were at when they were taking a break. And sometimes the student center was there. But we said that these were the two humped camels. And then there was yet a different type of group. And the one on the bottom graph sort of represented who we were, I think, most concerned about, which is the one humped camels who sort of work, and then kind of drop. I often thought of Georgia Tech as a kind of a campus where every student works as hard as architecture students do. So it's an intense place. So we had that kind of understanding, and we went back to the campus maybe a few weeks later, looking to try to understand what are the jobs to be done, or what are the jobs to be done that are on the minds of students. And we started to do this in focus groups, printing out on placards, wooden placards, different statements, different ideas of jobs to be done. We had kind of thought when we got to the campus that this would be the kind of, we said, well, these are potential jobs. Like, this is Georgia Tech. They're going to be really interested in technology or entrepreneurship or innovative problem solving. And we thought that, maybe they're interested in community and like live, learn, work, play. We were other kinds of things. But what we started to learn really, and this was another tool that we had used early on, which was just putting up a banner with just like different types of jobs to be done, trying to translate that previous graphic into something. And again, with the dots. We left a bunch of blank dots. And what we found is that students were really interested in restorative, having places that could be more restorative, that could activate the outdoors. So we were starting to get a better sense about what they were seeking, but we were still kind of a long way from understanding what it was that they wanted. We kept refining these. So we kept talking about maybe it should be a place for refuge, rest, refuge, or recovery, or creativity, or should it symbolize Georgia Tech? We had refuel. We had finding one's niche, promoting one's wellness, progress and service. Some of these things were, things that came from Georgia Tech literature about what they were trying to accomplish. And we began to, as we had students sort through these things, we asked them to prioritize, and we represented it this way. And what we found was that this phrasing of a job to be done, of rest and recovery, was really an important element that they wanted, or an important job to be done. And then bonding and meeting people, that was also very important for undergrads and grads and the sort of core committee that we met with. There other jobs to be done certainly resonated, serving the whole Georgia Tech community, promoting leadership, personal growth, being welcoming, helping to find your niche. But you can start to see that interest begins to fall down. Like, for example, let loose and have fun was just something that maybe some students were interested in, but wasn't really representative of most students, I would say. So what we did was we kind of distilled these findings into basically 5 jobs to be done. So we put as the top one this idea of serving the whole Georgia Tech community, and then reset, recover, and refuel was the second one, and then others were also important, but these are this is just how they began to lay out, and this was kind of a collaborative writing process, and it was really a process of deciding what the priorities should be for this campus center. I threw this in here because at the same time we were realizing that stress on campus, which is what the campus administrators were trying to tell us in 2015, that Georgia Tech was really experiencing high degrees of stress on campus. And in fact, the numbers were really high back in 82% of students said they or experienced a high degree of stress in at least one area, most commonly being academic. So that was kind of an issue. I wanted to focus a bit more on this idea of reset, restore, and refuel. What we did for each one of these jobs to be done is we reported back the results from the student interactions with the students through the jobs to be done workshops and through the intercept interviews and all that graphing. And the one that really stood out and seemed to really be a dominant notion that seemed to our minds seemed to be it would turn out to be a really major driver for the project itself. And that was reset, restore, and refuel. Now, I'm not going to show you this is just an image from, if I go back just 1 second, the reason for the picture of the airplane, I do have to tell this story, is that it's a picture from the 1929 Rose Bowl, and it's an early picture of an airplane refueling in flight. So early technology. So the top airplane is feeding fuel into this airplane on the bottom that has a question mark. And the reason it had a question mark is because they did not know how long that airplane could continuously fly if they kept trying to refuel it in flight. So the picture was from the 1929 Rose Bowl, January 1st, the Rose Bowl football game. And guess who played in that game? Well, it was Georgia Tech. And that made for a little bit of an interesting story to kind of report back to the campus. And you can see that this is a picture from the actual Rose Bowl football game. Georgia Tech is playing Cal, and Georgia Tech wins on a very fluke play where a Georgia Tech player fumbles the ball. A Cal player picks up the ball, but runs 60 yards the wrong way, and Georgia Tech gets a safety, and the final score is 8-7, and Georgia Tech wins. So that became just sort of a fun way to kind of talk about this. Anyway, another sort of tool that we started to use as we got further into the process was what we call the relationship puzzle, and we're just kind of identifying big categories of types of spaces: social, restoration, experiential, event and ballroom, dining and kitchen support, administration, retail, dining, and so on. And these are just kind of representative of not really specific about how much space, but kind of like a relative to each other. And you can see what we've done. What we did was we had this 3-tiered transparent model with plexiglass on a pretty abstracted site of the Georgia Tech campus. And what we asked students to do was to place these different program pieces on these different levels. So we were looking at what should be on top, what should be in the middle, what should be a ground floor and accessible, to, let's say, tech green. So students did this. We worked with different groups, and they explained. And as they were talking, we got new ideas from them. And from there, we started to distill out and started to learn some things. They started to get excited about the idea of having fun. And they talked about the top being an event space for a concert or an open mic, or that maybe even meeting up with a professor and sitting by a fireplace and chatting with them. And then one of the students said, well, that we could sit up, we could have another bar or a coffee bar, maybe a fireplace, social experiential place where we can sit and chat. That's a reset place where you go up to the roof and you reset. And that sort of was trying to use the way Georgia Tech students would talk in talking about these jobs to be done. So that's kind of student language. We kept going back to the campus even after that and asked students to work on a three-dimensional model and to come up with different ideas. We gave them the modeling tools and asked for their advice, and we still learned even more about their attitudes. So we learned that they really wanted to have this place blend seamlessly into tech green with, they said, with retail food and tables. And then they complained or pointed out that there's a kind of a funny bifurcated route around the campanile that kind of interrupted the natural flow. And then they talked about, they just loved having, they have a wonderful, campus, beautiful campus with lots of trees, and they wanted more of them. So those were some of the ideas. And so what we came up with was this idea of a distributed union. We knew that students would not take they wouldn't take more than 10 minutes to actually get to the student union. They were just too busy. So that was part of the reason for the sort of this very transactional student union. So we thought, well, if students are too busy to come to the union, we'll bring the union to them and we'll start to distribute it across. And that was a kind of an interesting idea, something that's not typically done with student centers. And this was the solution that eventually came out. We had the original student center building. We had a new Stamps Commons. I'll show you the interiors of some of these. We added a new cafe along what we and additional buildings here, and an exhibition hall way over here. So this is a 1/4-mile swath of the campus. Here's we redid the campanile. Here's Tech Green over here. But we called this the experiential path. The idea that there should be a new experience every minute, that by bringing these different functions to students out to where they could see them, that it would encourage them to take a break. And those are just some images from early on, but I will move through these quickly just to show you how we continued with that basic sort of strategy of showing students, again, this is a three-dimensional model, trying to get their sense about like how they would use different parts of the campus, what would be active places, what would be more sort of passive or places to reset. And again, with these three-dimensional, it's another sort of version of the three-dimensional relationship puzzle. So this was quite a task. But we learned a lot about where things might want to go. So then things were really up in the air. We didn't know they have a radio station. Should it have gone over here on the experiential path? Should the cafe have gone over here? There was a arts and crafts setting called Paper and Clay. And that was on the 3rd floor of the old building, and that actually got moved over to along the experiential path where students could actually see it. But things were pretty much up in the air as this process went through this redesign process. As we went through the redesign process, This is just kind of looking west. You can start to see how the buildings get arrayed. This is looking, these are sort of these new distributed buildings, an exhibition hall, rather than a traditional ballroom. The idea that you could drive your solar cars or have fighting robots. You could see that from the experiential path. This paper and clay got moved over to the experiential path. Finally, there were student services, a new cafe along this experiential path for students to see. And then this is looking, this was the original building, and this is a picture during construction, but where student orgs would be located in this new addition. And here's the campanile, which is getting a lot of treatment, or new fountain, spray fountain. And then we also worked really hard with a landscape architect to develop an accessible experiential path, or to extend the experiential path down this hill. So this will be nicely forested one of these years. We worked with individual student groups as well, focusing on their specific spaces. So this, in case this is a Black student organizations, and we wanted to find out about where they wanted to be located and what kinds of spaces they needed. And these were just some different tools that I'm borrowing from. There's a gentleman named Henry Sanoff, who was sort of one of the originators of great originators of participatory design in the United States, somebody that I've always looked up to. And you can see more of these jobs to be done statements that pertain just to their space. So this is what the project finally looked like when it opened in 2022. That is basically where that original transactional shop was. This is just sort of lounge space. You can see the sort of tiered seating here, plenty of access and views to the outdoors. So it's much brighter. So students, as they're walking through, they can see outside. As people are walking outside, they can see inside, see that there's lots of activities. This is what the experiential path looks like. There's these outdoor porches with overhangs, the large ceiling fans to circulate air. And you can see as students are sort of moving back and forth, they can see each other. So much more access to nature, native plantings, all the good stuff. This is what paper and clay looks like. So, instead of being up on the third floor and difficult to find, now it's right on the path, big windows. You can open up large doors. Students can be throwing pots and working on other crafts. And it's just inviting students to stop and take a break. This is after Congressman John Lewis died. He was a great civil rights leader and politician. He had been the congressman for this district where Georgia Tech is. The campus decided that they would name the new campus center building the John Lewis Student Center. And so there are these graphics here that celebrate his life and continue to communicate his important messages as it says, stand up for what you truly believe. So all very inspiring and all very appropriate for the campus. And I'll just leave with one last shot. So this is where the campanile is. You can see the old student center on the right, the new addition with plenty of daylight and views in and out. And of course, the campanile with its new spray fountain. The idea is that this new campus center will hopefully be seen as a new social hub, a place where you can bond with friends, meet new people, where you can study collaboratively, be creative, that a place that would be symbolically important for all students, that they would say, yep, I really like going to Georgia Tech. This was this whole setup here really makes me feel proud to be a Yellow Jacket, to be a member of the Georgia Tech campus community. And then finally, as students can sort of walk through these new pathways with new plantings, this experiential path, seeing different things, having what's known as positive distractions, that it will be a place for them to reset, restore, and refuel. And that is that story. Thank you.